You carry a force that can't be reverse engineered, no matter how closely someone shadows your every step. What you radiate isn't the product of imitation or quick fixes. It's been carved into your spirit by seasons that would have broken anyone else. Others think they can replicate your presence by mirroring the way you move, speak, or hold yourself, but what they don't understand is that you've been shaped in a workshop they've never set foot in. They try to step into your rhythm without knowing the melody that birthed it. They chase after an energy they've only seen the surface of, not realizing it comes from depths they've never dared to reach. Your power was formed in the long hours when the world was quiet, and the decisions you made when no applause was coming, and the strength you built when there was no safety net. That's why you can stand unshaken while they're scrambling to maintain appearances. They operate like someone rehearsing lines from a language they don't speak, reciting the sounds but missing the meaning. You move with a natural current that can't be rehearsed, because it isn't about performance, it's about origin. And the source that fuels you doesn't flicker when the spotlight turns away. It flows whether anyone is watching or not. That's why, when the dust settles, the difference is obvious. One is sustained by something eternal, the other is just trying to keep from burning out. Some people borrow strength, others are born with it stitched into their spirit. That's the difference they'll never close, no matter how polished their act appears. They can rehearse expressions, adjust their stance, and layer on whatever trends they think scream power, but all they're doing is layering disguises over uncertainty. Your assurance doesn't arrive in costume, it's carved into the way you exist. It didn't sprout from comfort or easy victories, it was forged in seasons where there was no safety net, only the choice to rise or dissolve. That's why it holds steady when the noise fades, why it doesn't tremble when the room is silent. It doesn't answer to the crowd or depend on fleeting nods of approval. It anchors itself in the unshakable knowledge of where you've walked and what you've survived. And that kind of depth can't be replicated by someone chasing the image of it. When others attempt to mirror it, you can sense the strain, movements slightly out of sync, timing that doesn't quite land, energy that feels borrowed rather than breathed. They confuse volume for conviction, filling the air with noise while missing the still gravity that presence brings. The harder they push to project it, the more transparent it becomes that it's coming from the surface, not the core. Yours was earned through battles no one documented, through losses that could have bent you, through standing firm in unfamiliar territory and refusing to shrink. That leaves an imprint no impersonation can reach. They can polish the exterior, but they can't manufacture the lineage of resilience that runs through you. Because what's lived in the marrow can't be removed, and what's worn like an accessory can always be taken off. They still measure their worth by how many eyes are on them, while you've already stepped beyond that need. That's why their energy always carries a hint of strain. It's fueled by response, not by essence. You're no longer in the phase where approval determines your pace. Your sense of value is rooted in something unshakable, so when you enter a space, you're not trying to impress, you're simply inhabiting your truth. That grounded presence can't be imitated. For them, attention is the oxygen they keep chasing. Every move is calculated for reaction, every word delivered with one ear tuned to the applause they hope will follow. Without that recognition, their spark dims. You've learned to generate your own light without waiting for someone else to flip the switch. That's why you can hold your own even in complete silence. While they're busy curating an image that needs constant tending, you've already survived seasons where there was no one watching, no affirmation, no nod of approval, and still kept moving. In that solitude, you discovered the kind of strength that doesn't waver when unnoticed. Once you've lived in that freedom, you can't go back to chasing affirmation. This is the gap they can't close. Their energy shifts depending on who's present, but yours holds steady whether you're with a handful of people or a crowd that could fill a stadium. That steadiness is magnetic. It tells people they can trust what they're seeing. They burn themselves out trying to sustain an image, but you thrive without the performance. And that's a reality they can't pretend into existence. They falter in the very terrain that shaped your foundation, and that's where the gap between you and them becomes undeniable. You didn't just pass through difficulty, you built a home in it. You've navigated ground that shifts without warning, learned the subtle signs of danger before it erupts, and mastered the art of moving steadily when everything around you threatens to collapse. What unsettles them is familiar territory to you. They assume your steadiness is something you were born with, a personality quirk that keeps you composed. They see how you move through challenges without flinching and mistake it for luck or detachment. What they can't see is the reality that your calm is the final product of relentless endurance. It was sculpted in moments where you had to either evolve or disappear, where adaptation wasn't a choice but the only way forward. You've refined the ability to protect your strength in chaos, to think clearly when every distraction demands your focus, and to trust your own steps even when the path vanishes beneath you. When they attempt to mirror that resilience without the hard-earned wisdom behind it, it doesn't last. The first sign of pressure reveals the gaps. They tighten up, lose their rhythm, and reveal the weight they can't carry. You, however, move with precision, no wasted action, no unnecessary strain. That's the contrast between someone forged by lived trial and someone who only studied survival from a distance. They want the elegance of your composure without walking through the experiences that built it. They want the unshakable presence without paying the price in struggle. But what they call effortless is actually discipline refined into instinct, and that truth always surfaces when the ground beneath them begins to break. They try to replicate the outcome without ever walking the path that creates it, and that's why their version fades so quickly. What others admire in you, your presence, your influence, the way you hold space without demanding it, wasn't born from a sudden stroke of luck. It's the product of years spent refining your discipline, shaping your character, and making choices that built something no storm could dismantle. You've endured the seasons when nothing seemed to work, yet you kept showing up until the foundation beneath you became unshakable. Their focus is fixed on the visible. They crave the shine without the shaping, the recognition without the responsibility. They try to mimic the end result like a painter tracing over a finished masterpiece, but without the layers of work underneath, their version feels hollow. It might catch the eye for a moment, but it can't hold anyone's attention for long, because it lacks the depth of what's been lived. Your energy carries weight because it's rooted in truth. Every choice you make is reinforced by the unseen labor, turning down distractions, confronting your own flaws, enduring trials that shaped your resilience. You've been through the quiet grind, the nights of questioning, the deliberate steps that no one clapped for. That's why your presence still holds power even in difficult times, because it isn't dependent on easy seasons. For them, it's a projection. They can borrow the gestures, echo the words, and rehearse the mannerisms, but without an anchor, they drift. Their version cracks under pressure while yours endures because it's not a performance, it's a structure built from the inside out. You've invested in the unseen layers, and that's why you remain unshaken when the winds change. They don't understand that lasting influence doesn't come from looking complete, it comes from being complete. What you carry isn't a temporary spark, it's a force that establishes itself without introduction. They keep mistaking your presence for a switch you flip on at will, thinking it's about charm, timing, or the right expression. They study the outer details, assuming your impact comes from personality or performance, yet they miss the reality. It's not about acting a part, it's about embodying a role you were forged to hold. Your presence shifts the dynamic of any space, not because you demand it, but because you've been shaped to stand in it. There's a steadiness that doesn't fade when the mood changes, when the environment grows tense, or when attention turns elsewhere. This strength wasn't chosen like an accessory, It was instilled through trials survived, convictions upheld, and moments where you refused to retreat when it would have been easier to step aside. They try to echo the cadence of your words, copy the stance of your body, even mirror the expressions you make, but without the depth that underpins it, the imitation feels weightless. People can sense when presence has no roots. They may not explain it, but they know something's missing. And that absence is the space between appearance and reality. A temporary performance bends with the crowd, but real authority remains unshaken by the setting. That's why you can command attention in silence, while they struggle to be heard even in noise. What you carry was earned in the unseen battles, and the commitments no one applauded, and the courage that didn't wait for an audience. They can dress themselves in the shape of it, but the substance is either built into you, or it isn't. What you carry wasn't crafted overnight. It's the result of a life fully inhabited, shaped by every moment that's passed through you. They work on appearance like it's a mask to be painted, thinking if they can perfect the colors and angles, they can evoke the same effect you have. But what they build is a surface, smooth, bright, and hollow. It holds up until life presses against it, and then the flaws show through. Yours isn't assembled from pieces, it's grown from the inside out. It holds the imprint of every hardship endured, every risk taken, every quiet triumph that never made it to the public eye. It carries the subtle marks of experience, the invisible weight of lessons learned, and the ease that comes from no longer needing to prove anything. It's been shaped in seasons that would have erased anyone who didn't have your resolve. That's why it feels whole. When they try to mirror it, they stay locked on the surface, replicating posture, tone, and style, believing the outside alone creates presence. But without depth underneath, it falters. It shifts when attention shifts, cracks under pressure, and reveals that there's nothing grounding it. People might not be able to explain why, but they know when something is all front and no substance. Your presence doesn't weaken because it isn't built for display, it's built for endurance. It feels the same whether praised or criticized, whether in the spotlight or unseen. That steadiness draws people in without demand, because it's real. And that's the difference. A surface can be crafted, but essence is lived. One fades with time, the other deepens. And depth will always command more than decoration ever could. They strain to maintain a rhythm that drains them, while you move with a flow that feeds you. You're operating in the lane you were built for, so what you radiate doesn't require effort, it's the byproduct of alignment. There's no need to hype yourself into being. Your presence carries its own gravity because it's anchored in truth. For them, it's a constant climb. Every step requires overextension, constant self-promotion, and a level of performance that can't be sustained without collapse. They swing between bursts of exaggerated energy and sudden disappearance, shifting personas in an attempt to hold onto a spark that isn't theirs. It's the cost of moving in a pattern that doesn't match their core. Instead of refueling them, it empties them. Your energy works in reverse. It restores itself because it's not an act. You're not chasing momentum, you are momentum. That's why your presence feels steady even when circumstances are chaotic. While they ride unpredictable highs and lows, you remain consistent, and that consistency is what builds trust in the people around you. Without pointing it out, your stability exposes their volatility. It's not about competition, it's about endurance. Their glow flickers under pressure because it's fueled by imitation. Yours doesn't waver because it's drawn from a source they can't access without becoming something different entirely. When you're aligned, showing up isn't a battle, it's your natural state. But when someone is pretending to be what they're not, every day becomes an uphill fight. And sooner or later, the difference is obvious. You're still moving forward with the same strength, while they're trying to recover from the weight of holding up a version of themselves they were never meant to carry. What you hold in your quiet moments isn't emptiness, it's mastery. They see you at rest and think stillness is something that can be worn like a style, but they misunderstand completely. Your calm is not a pause born of uncertainty, it's the stance of someone who knows their ground and refuses to be moved by noise. You're not idle, you're deliberate. And that composure was built in seasons that demanded you remain unshaken while everything around you shifted. When they attempt to copy it, the surface might look similar, but the feel is entirely different. Without the foundation beneath it, their version comes across as detached, hesitant, or out of place. For you, restraint is a decision rooted in experience. It's the patience of someone who knows the right moment will arrive and doesn't waste strength chasing what isn't ready. For them, it's just standing still, hoping to appear in control. People can sense the truth behind stillness. They may not be able to name it, but they feel when it's supported by depth and when it's simply a facade. Yours carries the imprint of moments that would have broken others, yet you stayed centered, unmoved, and unshaken. That lived history transforms your calm into presence, while theirs remains a pose that fractures under strain. You can wait without losing momentum because you understand the difference between patience and stagnation. That's why imitation fails. Stillness without conviction is fragile, it collapses the moment pressure rises. Yours endures because it's built on clarity, discipline, and unshakable trust in timing. And no matter how perfectly they arrange themselves, the weight of the real thing will always expose the emptiness of the copy. They present a version of themselves they can't sustain, and it becomes obvious the moment reality asks for proof. Matching what you carry isn't about adopting an image, mastering a tone, or borrowing gestures. It's a cost most aren't ready to pay. Not in currency, but in the inner toll it takes to live with the weight and consistency you hold. Your presence was shaped in long seasons of rebuilding, in wisdom earned through hard lessons, and in the resilience that came from starting again when nothing was left. You've already met the price, which is why you can move in it without strain. They try to imitate the end result without walking the miles that formed it. They want the steadiness without the nights it took to find it. They want the respect without the sacrifices that commanded it. They want the glow without the refining that made it real. And because they've skipped the process, their version can only ever be an imitation, passable at a glance, but fragile when touched. Life always reveals what's genuine. It does so through challenges that dismantle anything built on pretense, through moments that strip away image until only truth remains. When those moments arrive, they falter because there is no structure holding them together. What they build depends on constant upkeep and careful staging, and that's a cycle no one can endure forever. You stand because you've weathered enough storms to know the ground you're on. Your steadiness isn't a role to maintain, it's who you've become. There's no extra effort needed to keep it alive because it's not separate from you. For them, it's a performance that demands endless attention, and eventually the distance between who they are and who they're pretending to be widens. That's when the cracks show, the mask slips, and the truth becomes unavoidable. You already own what they're trying to rent, and the difference in permanence speaks for itself. They fall behind because they've never built the inner architecture, and that's why their imitation always unravels. What fuels you isn't just charm, appearance, or quick thinking. It's the deeply rooted framework shaped by what you believe, how you think, and the steady connection to something beyond yourself. That unseen structure is what makes your presence unwavering and your influence tangible. It's not simply about the actions you take, but the alignment between your convictions and your choices. Every step you make draws from the depth of your own journey, from the layers of growth earned through trial and transformation. You've stripped away what weakened you, fortified what strengthened you, and anchored yourself to principles that keep you balanced when life shifts unexpectedly. That's why you can face sudden challenges without losing your center. They lack that kind of inner foundation. They're only echoing the visible gestures, attempting to recreate the surface without the stability underneath. It's like trying to replicate a masterpiece without understanding the technique. It might hold together for a short while, but time will reveal the flaws. When pressure comes, they scramble, improvising without guidance, and the cracks in the performance start to show. You remain steady because your power draws from a source you've learned to trust and protect. That connection allows you to adapt without diluting who you are. They, however, are constantly adjusting, trying to keep up, because they're building on borrowed pieces with no lasting anchor. Over time, the distinction becomes undeniable. The difference between something held together temporarily and something crafted from the ground up is always clear. Your path isn't about rivalry, it's about invention. While they're locked into comparisons, measuring themselves against your steps, you've moved into a space where their scoreboard doesn't exist. They watch your actions like they're tracking an opponent, but you're not even in the same race. You're shaping, designing, and unfolding ideas that come from a place they can't access, because you're not reacting, you're originating. Your drive isn't fueled by proving worth over someone else's. It's rooted in answering the pull inside you, in making something that didn't exist yesterday, and stretching beyond what you've already done. That's why your energy never feels recycled, it's in a constant state of renewal. Those watching can sense the difference between someone led by vision and someone chasing footsteps. They operate in pursuit mode, mistaking replication for progress. By the time they've mirrored a move you made, you've already transformed it into something else. They're aiming at echoes, chasing the outlines of where you've been, not the reality of where you stand now. That gap makes their efforts look misplaced, not because they lack talent, but because they're trapped in a contest that exists only in their perspective. You're not pausing to let them catch up, and you're not playing a game that requires an opponent. Your focus is forward, propelled by something more enduring than comparison. The real strength isn't in surpassing others, it's in staying completely aligned with who you are meant to be. They can continue shadowing if they wish, but the race they think they're running is happening in their own minds. You've already stepped into a space where imitation can't follow, because creation, by its nature, will always move faster than the copy. They chase the radiance without enduring the trials that give it life. What they admire in you isn't decoration, it's the imprint of every test you've walked through and every moment you refused to break. Your light wasn't picked up casually, it was shaped in seasons that demanded you rise from places meant to end you. It's the aftermath of hardships that refined you, the proof that you endured what would have undone others. They want the appearance of brilliance without stepping into the conditions that forge it. They crave the recognition but shy away from the weight of transformation. The kind of presence you carry isn't for display, it has depth, warmth, and permanence. It's infused with the memory of lessons paid for in full, of nights spent rebuilding in silence, and of faith strengthened under relentless pressure. When they attempt to mirror it, they can only reproduce the surface. Their shine lacks the grounding of lived experience, so it fades when tested. They can style themselves in confidence, posture themselves in strength, and design the aesthetic, but the absence of endurance always reveals itself. Real light holds a texture that imitation can't replicate. It's steady, alive, and quietly commanding. The truth is, what you radiate was born in the very spaces most people avoid. It carries the unspoken message, I've been where breaking was the only option, and I chose to rise instead. That's not something a trend can teach. It's not something that can be borrowed. It's something only the refining heat can create. And while they can perform the image for a time, the difference becomes unmistakable. Their glow is temporary, but yours is untouchable. What you carry now is the proof of every version of yourself you've had to shed. The way you speak, move, and take up space is not a coincidence. It's the living imprint of the trials you've endured, the patterns you've broken, and the growth you've fought for. Your presence didn't appear out of thin air. It was shaped over years of confronting yourself, letting go of what no longer fit, and stepping into the identity you refuse to settle without. It isn't an act, it's a record of transformation. Those who've walked their own road of change can recognize it instantly, because it carries a depth that can't be manufactured. That's why imitation feels empty. They're trying to replicate the signs, the calm, the composure, the certainty, without undergoing the inner rewiring that makes those traits real. It's like holding a trophy you never competed for. It might impress some for a moment, but to those who've earned the real thing, it rings hollow. True energy is built, not borrowed. It's the sum of tests passed, storms survived, and the unglamorous work done in the shadows. It shows in the way you move deliberately when chaos strikes, and how you can stand rooted without rushing to defend your worth, and the quiet authority that needs no announcement. Those qualities are the residue of evolution, and they can't be fast-tracked. They want the outcome without the becoming. They think they can skip the hard chapters and still arrive with the same weight in their presence. But without the journey, there is no substance, and when there's no substance, the illusion eventually shatters. Real growth leaves marks you can't fake, and that's why your energy endures while theirs will always fracture under close inspection.